I looked up from my bench that morning and saw a woman standing at the defense table. Her eyes were scanning the room, searching. Confusion spread across her face. Her hands moved in gestures I recognized as sign language, though I couldn't understand what she was saying. But I could read her body language. She was asking a question. She was looking for someone. I turned to my clerk. "Miss Reyes, where is the interpreter?" She checked her notes. Her voice was hesitant. "Your Honor, the interpreter is listed as unavailable. The note says she's in custody." I set my pen down slowly. "In custody?" I repeated, "The interpreter who is supposed to be here to provide this woman with her constitutional right to understand these proceedings is in jail." Miss Reyes nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. The report says she was arrested last night." I removed my reading glasses. I folded them once. I placed them on the bench. Why was she arrested? Miss Reyes read from the screen, "The charge is obstruction of a police officer." The room went silent. I leaned forward. My voice was calm, measured, but I could feel something harder underneath it. The interpreter who was supposed to ensure this defendant could communicate with law enforcement was arrested for obstruction while trying to ensure this defendant could communicate with law enforcement. No one answered. Marisol's hands moved again. She was asking questions no one could answer. Her frustration was visible. Her isolation was complete. I looked at her. Then I looked at the gallery. Then I looked at my bailiff. Miss Reyes stood. Case number 2025 CR 4417, State versus Marisol Vega. 4 counts. Failure to comply with lawful commands. Resisting arrest. Reckless driving. Failure to appear for scheduled court hearing. I raised a hand. The clerk stopped. I looked at Marisol. I spoke slowly, clearly, even though I knew she couldn't hear me. "Miss Vega, can you hear me?" Marisol watched my lips. She shook her head. She signed again. Her hands moved in careful, deliberate gestures. I turned to the clerk. "Does anyone in this courtroom know American Sign Language?" Silence. I looked at the prosecutor. "Does your office have an interpreter available?" The prosecutor hesitated. "Not immediately, Your Honor." My expression didn't change, but my voice dropped to something quieter, sharper. "We cannot proceed until communication is equal. This is not optional." I turned back to Miss Reyes. "Pull the file on the interpreter's arrest. I want to know exactly why Naomi Clark is in custody and why she isn't here." Miss Reyes typed quickly. A moment later, she read from the screen. Interpreter Naomi Clark was detained at approximately 8:47 p.m. yesterday evening following a traffic stop involving the defendant. The arresting officer, Daniel Kim, reports that Miss Clark refused multiple commands to step back from the scene. She was charged with obstruction. My jaw tightened. Step back from the scene while interpreting for a deaf woman who was being detained. Miss Reyes nodded. I opened the file in front of me. I read silently. Then I looked up. "Let me understand this. Miss Vega was pulled over. She is profoundly deaf. She requested an interpreter. An interpreter arrived. The interpreter attempted to facilitate communication, and the officer arrested the interpreter for doing her job." The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, the officer's report indicates—" "I don't care what the report indicates. I care what the law requires. And the law requires that a deaf person be provided meaningful access to communication during any interaction with law enforcement. That's not a courtesy. It's the Americans with Disabilities Act." I turned to Officer D'Angelo. "Bring Officer Kim into this courtroom now." Marisol's hands moved again. She was asking what was happening. No one could answer her. The isolation deepened. I looked at her. My voice was softer now, though I knew she couldn't hear it. "Miss Vega, I'm going to make sure you understand everything that happens here. That's a promise." I turned to Miss Reyes. "Contact the jail. I want Naomi Clark released immediately and brought here. I want her obstruction charge reviewed by the prosecutor's office within the hour. And I want a full report on why a certified interpreter was arrested for interpreting." Miss Reyes nodded and picked up the phone. I leaned back. I looked at the case file again. I read the custody logs. I read the transcript of what happened at the jail. Naomi had insisted Marisol needed ASL access. She told the officers Marisol could not understand verbal commands. She explained that Marisol was reaching for a laminated card that said, "I am deaf in English and Spanish." She asked them to wait. She asked them to let her interpret. She asked them to follow the law. The officers told her to stop interfering. One officer said her signing was making things harder. Another said she was creating a disturbance. A third told her to step back or she would be arrested. She didn't step back. She kept signing. She kept interpreting. She kept insisting that Marisol had rights, and so they arrested her. Marisol spent the night in a holding cell, unable to communicate with anyone. She signed to the walls. She signed to the officers. She signed to other detainees. No one understood. No one responded. She cried and signed and cried some more. The courtroom door opened. Officer Daniel Kim entered. He was in his early 30s, in uniform, carrying a small notebook. He approached the witness stand. The clerk swore him in. My voice was calm. "Officer Kim, tell the court what happened on the night of November 3rd. Kim opened his notebook. His voice was steady, professional. At approximately 8:21 p.m., I observed a vehicle traveling 48 miles per hour in a posted 35 zone. I initiated a traffic stop. The vehicle pulled over after approximately 2 blocks. I approached the driver's side. I identified myself and asked for license and registration. He turned a page. The driver did not respond. I repeated the request. She still did not respond. She appeared to be ignoring me. I raised my voice. She reached toward the glove compartment. I ordered her to stop and show her hands. She did not comply. I opened the door and attempted to secure her. She pulled away. I called for backup. I leaned forward slightly. "Did the driver say anything to you?" "No, Your Honor." She was silent. "Did she make any gestures?" Kim hesitated. "She was moving her hands." "Moving her hands," I repeated. "In what way?" "I'm not sure. It looked like gestures, hand motions. Did it occur to you that she might be using sign language?" Kim's face flushed. "Not at the time, Your Honor." My voice remained calm. "What happened next?" "An interpreter arrived. She said she'd been called by someone at the scene. She approached the vehicle and started making the same hand motions. I told her to step back. She refused. She said the driver was deaf and needed an interpreter. I told her I needed to complete the stop first. She said I couldn't question the driver without an interpreter. She kept insisting she was interfering with my commands. I arrested her for obstruction. I was silent for a moment. Then I spoke, my voice quieter than before. "Officer, if a person cannot hear your commands, failure to comply cannot be defiance." Kim looked down. I didn't realize she was deaf until the interpreter told me. "And when the interpreter told you, what did you do?" I told her to step back so I could complete the stop. "Did you request an interpreter through official channels?" "No, Your Honor." I turned to Ms. Reyes. "Are there any ADA-related documents in this file?" Ms. Reyes opened a folder. She read aloud, "Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Vega submitted an ASL interpreter request form 2 months ago when she received a parking citation. The form was submitted to the court clerk's office, the traffic division, and the prosecutor's office. It included her contact information, her interpreter's contact information, and a request that all future interactions include ASL access." My expression hardened. So the system knew, the system was notified, and the system ignored it. Ms. Reyes continued, "There are also 3 emails from the interpreter's agency requesting confirmation that an interpreter would be provided for any court appearances or law enforcement interactions. None of the emails were answered." I leaned back. None were answered. Ms. Reyes turned another page. "There's also a voicemail transcript from the jail supervisor to the interpreter's agency. It was left at 11:03 p.m. on November 3rd. It says, 'We don't pay interpreters at night. She'll have to write notes.'" The room went cold. My voice was soft, surgical. Rights are not a luxury item. They are not budget dependent. I turned to the prosecutor. "Does your office have a position on this?" The prosecutor stood. His voice was uncertain. Your Honor, the department is reviewing the procedures. Reviewing? I interrupted. A woman was arrested for being deaf. An interpreter was arrested for interpreting, and the system is reviewing procedures. The courtroom door opened again. Naomi Clark entered, escorted by Officer D'Angelo. She looked exhausted. Her clothes were wrinkled from a night in holding, but her expression was steady, professional. I stood. It was the first time I had stood during a hearing in a long time. Miss Clark, on behalf of this court, I apologize. What was done to you was wrong. What was done to Miss Vega was wrong, and I intend to make sure it doesn't happen again. Naomi's eyes filled. She nodded. I gestured to the witness stand. Please, I need you to interpret, and I need to hear what happened. Naomi took the stand. The clerk swore her in. She looked at Marisol. She signed. Marisol's face flooded with relief. Her hands moved quickly, urgently. Naomi interpreted. She's asking what's happening. She's asking if she's going to jail. She's asking why no one would talk to her. My voice was gentle. Tell her she's not going to jail. Tell her I'm going to make sure she understands everything from this moment forward. Naomi signed. Marisol's shoulders relaxed slightly. I turned to Naomi. Miss Clark, tell the court what happened on November 3rd. Naomi's voice was steady. I received a call from a bystander who said a deaf woman was being stopped by police and couldn't communicate. I drove to the scene. When I arrived, Officer Kim was shouting at Miss Vega. She was signing that she was deaf. She was reaching for a card in her glove compartment that explains her disability. He thought she was reaching for a weapon. She paused. I approached. I identified myself as a certified ASL interpreter. I told him she was deaf and couldn't hear his commands. He told me to step back. I explained that she needed an interpreter to understand what was happening. He said I was interfering. I said the ADA requires an interpreter. He said if I didn't step back, I'd be arrested. I said I couldn't step back because she had no way to communicate without me. Her voice cracked slightly. So he arrested me. My gaze moved to Officer Kim. Is that accurate? Kim nodded. Yes, Your Honor. And what did you say to Miss Clark when she told you about the ADA? Kim hesitated. I said her signing was making things harder. The room froze. 5 seconds passed. 7, 10, 12. That was how long it took for ignorance to echo through my courtroom. My voice, when it came, was quieter than before, sharper. American Sign Language is not interference. It is communication. I opened the file again. I read silently. Then I began. Here's what the evidence shows. Miss Vega is profoundly deaf. She submitted an ADA request form 2 months ago. The system ignored it. She was pulled over for a minor traffic violation. She could not hear the officer's commands. She attempted to communicate through sign language and by reaching for an identification card. The officer misinterpreted her actions as non-compliance. An interpreter arrived to provide legally required access. The officer arrested the interpreter for providing that access. Miss Vega spent the night in custody without any means of communication. The jail refused to provide an interpreter because it was after hours. I closed the file. Every single one of those actions violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. Every single one of them violated Miss Vega's constitutional rights, and every single one of them is unacceptable. I looked at Marisol. Naomi interpreted as I spoke. Miss Vega, all charges against you are dismissed. Your arrest record will be expunged. You will receive a formal apology from this court and from the Providence Police Department. You will be compensated for the interpreter fees that should have been provided at the time of your stop and during your detention. Marisol's hands moved. Naomi interpreted. She's asking if she did something wrong. My voice was soft. Tell her no. Tell her the system failed her, and tell her I'm going to make sure it doesn't fail anyone else. I turned to Officer Kim. Officer, you will complete a 40-hour ADA compliance training course. You will submit a written report on disability rights in law enforcement, and you will personally apologize to Ms. Vega and Ms. Clark. Kim nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I turned to the prosecutor. Your office will review Miss Clark's obstruction charge. I expect it to be dismissed within 24 hours. She will also receive compensation for her unlawful detention. I looked at Miss Reyes. This court will implement the following policies effective immediately. First, a 24-hour ASL interpreter hotline will be established for all law enforcement interactions. Second, every officer in the Providence Police Department will complete mandatory disability awareness training within 60 days. Third, a custody ADA compliance officer will be appointed to ensure that all detainees with disabilities receive appropriate accommodations. Fourth, any future ADA request forms submitted to this court will be flagged and confirmed within 48 hours. I leaned forward. Disability is not defiance. Silence is not resistance. It may be a language you never learned. I paused. Miss Reyes, prepare a full report on this case. I want it sent to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. I want them to know what happened here and what we're doing to fix it. Miss Reyes nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I turned back to Naomi. Miss Clark, thank you for standing up for Miss Vega. You upheld the law when others ignored it. That took courage and it cost you a night in jail. I'm sorry for that. This court is grateful for what you did. Naomi signed to Marisol. Marisol signed back. Naomi's voice was soft. She says thank you. She says she thought no one would listen. I looked at Marisol. Tell her I listened. Tell her this court listened, and tell her that from now on the system will listen too. The hearing was nearly over, but I raised a hand. Miss Clark, I have one more request. Naomi looked up. I'd like you to teach me two signs. I want to say something to Miss Vega directly. The courtroom went still. Naomi stepped down from the witness stand. She approached the bench. She demonstrated two signs. I watched carefully. I practiced once, twice, then I nodded. I looked at Marisol. I raised my hands. I signed slowly, carefully. I'm sorry. Marisol's eyes filled with tears. I signed again. Thank you. Marisol signed back. Her hands moved in a gesture that needed no translation. She placed her hand over her heart. She bowed her head slightly. Naomi's voice was barely a whisper. She says you gave her voice back. I nodded. No. She always had a voice. We just weren't listening. 3 weeks later, the Providence Police Department launched a disability rights training program. Every officer completed it. Officer Kim was among the first to graduate. His final essay was titled The Language I Didn't Know. The 24-hour ASL interpreter hotline received 32 calls in its first month. 32 people who would have been arrested for non-compliance were instead given the communication access they needed. Naomi Clark's obstruction charge was dismissed with prejudice. The city issued a formal apology. She received full compensation for her detention and lost wages. Marisol Vega's arrest record was expunged. She received a personal apology from the police chief. She also received a call from the mayor, who thanked her for exposing the gaps in the system. The court's ADA request forms were redesigned. They were now available in ASL video format, large print, braille, and 15 written languages. Every form submission triggered an automatic confirmation and a follow-up call. The Department of Justice reviewed my report. They used it as a model case study for ADA compliance in municipal courts nationwide. I keep a note card on my desk now, handwritten. It says, "Silence is not resistance. It may be a language you never learned." I look at it every morning before court begins, and on the wall behind my bench, visible to everyone who enters the courtroom, is a small framed sign. It's in American Sign Language. It says, "Justice for all and everyone."